Joe, let's start off with them. What if I told you a year ago today they were in the mid to high 20s when it came to their recruiting ranking? What if I told you this in the beginning of the season they were 19th in recruiting when it came to recruiting rankings? So in between the months of August and December, when the early signing period happened, during the season, I might add, the Texas Longhorns jumped that high, signing five five-star recruits and ended number one. Your thoughts on what Sark and the guys are building over in Austin?
Yeah, we already spoke super highly about this Texas team and the recruiting efforts that they had during the original signing period. But I think it's just reiterated now that this is finalized. There's always that chance that maybe guys change their mind if they're not fully signed. Not the case here for Texas. There's so much attention that needs to deservedly go towards the Longhorns, and more specifically Steve Sarkisian, and the way that he has gradually, year by year, elevated this team. There was, I would argue, quite a bit of uncertainty from the outside world on if Steve Sarkisian would work at Texas. Knowing his failures and off-the-field issues that had impacted his ability to be a coordinator, to be a head coach, all of those things, to where he is now. This team has produced a quality product multiple times over the past couple of years. They have developed a lot of guys to turn them into premier NFL draft prospects. And now I think it comes to full fruition where they're in the mix to finish in the top three. And even further than that, finishing with the top class on all major sites for the first time in 20 years. They led with five-star signees. That is exactly how you go from being a team that just misses out, loses in the semifinal, to winning a national championship. That's where the separation is. That is what Georgia needed to do. That's what Alabama was able to do so successfully in consecutive year-over-year situations, that they were able to constantly get back there. LSU to win national titles, to be recruiting at the top, and to finish with top classes. Finishing with that many 5 stars and knowing that you're able to develop those guys into premier playmakers and get early contributions from them, that is what is going to help Texas eventually win a national championship.
Well, it's not missed upon me that Georgia finished at number 2. Stay with me. Justice Terry flipped.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're talking about who would have been 1 and 2 was him. Because, right. So you're talking about Justice Terry in that scenario. So not only did they get Elijah Griffin, meaning Georgia, and Isaiah Gibson and others for that defense, but Georgia normally would go a clean sweep. Right? They would go a complete clean sweep, and that would be how Kirby continued to dominate defensively, like he always does. But then Justice Terry flipped, and then you had a new number 1. Joe, how about this? Not only did you sign the number 1 overall class, 22 of those players are enrolled. 22.
That's nuts.
So when you look at Texas, and that's per On3, just in case anybody wants to go and check it, you can go check it out there. But think about this. You got Jonah Williams, who can play safety. You bring in Justice Terry, who we just talked about. Lance Jackson. Joe, they need edge presence. Could Lance Jackson do some of the same stuff that Colin Simmons literally did for Texas a year ago? What do we always talk about? You win on the line of scrimmage and up the middle defensively. You win on the line of scrimmage and up the middle offensively, and how you run the football and how you dominate on both sides of the ball. That's how teams will continue to win championships. You're right. You're 1,000% right. When you go out there and you dominate on one side of the ball the way that they did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of their top recruits are defensively. What did they need to go and replenish? Defense. Oh, and by the way, they got Jamie French in there too. One of the top receivers in the country, also enrolled. You went and did what you needed to do. And what's even crazier, their class could have been better and bigger if you don't miss out on the DeCorian Moore and others. That's where the little bit of parity comes here too when we talk about how are things so close. Normally that kid would have gone to Texas or Texas A&M or LSU, wherever he would have gone, but he goes to Oregon. I think there's something to be said here, though, and even mentioning all of that when it comes to recruiting, especially with Sark. Look, man, it's on now. I mean, you can't go into an offseason not talking about them being a high contender to win a natty. Not anymore. At least not in this offseason. They finished the last 2 years in the top 4. They've been recruiting in the top 5. They finally hit that hump. And, Joe, they flipped 2 big guys at the end there. 5-star Cade Phillips, who was committed to LSU, he flips to Texas there at the end on signing day, on the early signing day period. So they have gone out there, and what we thought about Texas at all times when NIL was enacted was what? Man, they're going to be able to buy whoever they want. And I'm not saying that happened here necessarily, but, Joe, they did. But they did it, by the way, in being smart. They went and got their guys. They didn't Texas A&M this thing, remember, a couple of years ago with Jimbo.
Right.
They went out there and got dudes that they knew that could come in there and play for their system. Joe, the truth is, when you look at Texas and Sark right now, the top guys that they're getting, Colin Simmons and others, Anthony Hill and others, what do all of them have in common? They're hitting on all of these 5-stars. See, some of these 5-stars come in, and it takes them a little bit while to go in and things like that. Joe, name one. Name one that they're not bringing in that at some point is not a key contributor in the very beginning of all this stuff.
Well, that was a big issue, too, and it goes in line with what I just brought up a second ago. A big issue pre-Sark was that they would bring in 5-star guys.
And miss.
They wouldn't finish in the top number 1 spot in recruiting classes, but they would be able to sign some of these. Like one guy that comes to mind, Caden Stearns, I remember. He was he was a big-time 5-star guy, and these guys wouldn't develop. That was the big issue, that these guys weren't contributing and developing to the point where they would go on to be first-round, second-round picks. That's what the difference is right now. That's what I think feels so starkly different for Steve Sarkisian, is that not only is he encouraging and recruiting the right guys to come play for him, but he's picking the guys that can play early, and he's helping those guys get better year over year. Kelvin Banks is like a great example of a guy who started as a true freshman, one of his earliest commits, and then he goes on to now being likely the first tackle selected, if not one of the top 3 tackles selected in the 2025.
Going to be the top tackle selected.
Well, Campbell's not going to be the top tackle selected. Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons is going to be the top tackle selected, but it plays into the point that I'm making here.
No.
And it's going to be even crazier in the next 2 drafts with Colin Simmons, with Wingo, and Anthony Hill.
Simmons got 2 years.
Simmons got 2 years. Anthony Hill is going to probably be a first-round guy next year with how freaking fast he is as a linebacker.
Look, here's another thing. Derek Williams. I mean, how good would that safety room have been if Derek Williams doesn't go out early in the season with an ACL injury?
Yeah.
They are recruiting their asses off. Joe, they don't really go in the portal unless they got to now. I mean, this is what you thought a Texas school would look like with all of that money. They're doing exactly what they need to do. I'll say this, though. With high recruiting comes high responsibilities. When you finish on one of these rankings at number 1, God forbid you do it again, fans are going to say I'm crazy, but I've lived it. You better get over that hump now. There's no more Final Fours anymore. There's no more saying that you don't have the talent. You have to now win it. So the pressure is on. Not that it wasn't already on, but the pressure is now really on when you